Welcome back. You're watching Canadian Innovators. Joining me today is Dean Allison, MP for Niagara West and the host of the Hill Update. Dean, let's talk about the budget and focus on manufacturing. The last few budgets have been very content-free on any kind of manufacturing strategy. What are you seeing and what could we do to address this?
So, you raise a great point. And as I looked at some of the issues that we have right now, cost of food is one, cost of energy is another. Those are two great examples of, investments we could be using in our country. We looked at some of our policies over the last couple of years, and we've turned away literally over $100 billion in new investment. And if you start looking at, some of the things that we're being challenged on right now, if we had investments in manufacturing, infrastructure, all the things that help get our products to market, all these other kinds of things, we would be much better off. I don't think people understand that manufacturers create great paying jobs, which also fuel those with skills, right? We got our millwrights, electricians, who also earn great wages. And if we're not producing it here in Canada, we're missing an opportunity for a higher standard of living, if you will. And we're also missing opportunities to attract investments because of policies that may leave people scratching their head to say, is Canada really a safe place to invest?
100%. We're also seeing that we put ourselves in a very vulnerable position. With COVID, we didn't have masks and ventilators and gowns. So it's not just a prosperity, but it's also a security issue. But just touching on one of the things that you said, supply chain. I'm hearing from everybody there's a supply chain problem. Even if we have manufacturing here, we can't get the parts that go into that supply chain. Talk to me about what you're seeing and how we can get around the supply chain issue.
So that's a great point. And I think, one of the supply chains and one of the manufacturers is food production, right? That's a large one in this country. And I've been talking to farmers recently. I've talked to as many as a half a dozen farmers in the last week, talking to me about their concerns for getting access to fertilizer. So in the farming community, they talk about the 3 Fs: fertilizer, fuel, and freight. And if we think about all those things, they're all interrelated. If you look at what's going on in terms of the cost, in order to make sure that you could produce your goods of services, we think back to if we were energy self-sufficient, we should be food self-sufficient, and certainly we should be a production country, as you mentioned, because we struggled getting important and simple issues like masks, for example. So we should have a strategy in this country to make sure that we are self-sufficient when it comes to a number of these fields. We should have an employment strategy around immigration. We should have an energy strategy to figure out how we can be self-sufficient. We have got all the tools in our country, but what we miss sometimes are the ability to get those things to market and create the climate that makes people want to come here and invest and people grow their jobs here.
Of course, and we do have the greatest opportunity in this country. We have resources, we have great people. We've got things that other countries are envious about, but for some reason we don't seem to have a strategy to really utilize those benefits that we have for job growth and prosperity in our country. But Dean, I can't let you escape without talking about the Conservative leadership race. Talk to us about the leadership race and what you're seeing shaping up.
Sure. No, it seems to be generating a lot of interest, as any leadership race will. We've got a lot of great potential leaders, and I think that's always good when you have a strong field. First 3 months is going to be selling memberships. The last 3 months will be convincing people, getting your actual ballots out and getting them back in by the first part of September. So, we're just starting to see where it's going to shake out now because there's still a deadline. I think we got certain deadlines have already been hit. So we know that we've got a number of people interested, I think up to 12, but there's still more targets to hit in terms of money raised, et cetera, et cetera. And so I don't think the real race will start, even though it's ongoing right now, until we find out what the final field is, which means we're going to have some debates. And then after that, looking at who's selling memberships and how well they're doing.
So talk to us about those candidates that are the front runners and what you see is resonating out of their campaigns.
Well, I think that we have to look at what's happened recently, most recently as earlier this year with the truckers' protest. And while not everyone agreed with the protests, one thing you can agree with is there was a tremendous amount of interest And there's also a tremendous amount of support from regular, everyday Canadians, regardless of their status, whether they're vaxxed or unvaxxed. None of that stuff mattered. People feel like the erosion of their freedoms is happening. It's well underway. And we see that with some of various legislation that is being introduced or will be introduced in the House. And so I think one of the things that we need to be mindful of is that people are very frustrated. And so any candidate that is talking about freedom, that is talking about reducing mandates, that's talking about choice and giving people an opportunity to live their lives in a way that's meaningful, those are the candidates that I think are going to do the best in this leadership race.
So is anyone going to be able to catch up to Pierre? That's my question.
That'll be yet to be seen. He's certainly filling a lot of houses up.
Well, we're going to go to commercial break. We'll be right back. You're watching Canadian Innovators.